Sue Terry, welcome back to Gray America. How are you?
I'm good, Graham. Thanks so much for having me on. Hey, Darren.
Hello.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great that you reached out. Read your book. It's just sitting on my bookshelf in the back there.
Awesome.
I thought it. Yeah, this sounds kind of interesting and definitely interesting. Hermetic principles in music, the seven hermetic principles in music. So, yeah, we're looking forward to chatting about that. How have you been since the last time we had you on?
Yeah, I've been well. I've been well, busy, writing a lot and playing a lot. As you know, I live in Ecuador, so there's a lot going on here. It's like the summer season, but I think you guys are having a heat wave, right? We're
No,
freezing over here.
no, we're not. We're not having a heat wave. I mean, not where I am. I'm in the middle of the prairies in Canada, and it's been pretty ugly summer so far. Lots of rain and clouds. We haven't really got like summer heat yet. I mean, Darren's a little bit further west, so he might have a little bit more heat. But I mean, Ecuador's. I mean, so many people are interested in Ecuador these days. How is that going down there?
Oh, it's a great country. I've been living here off and on since 2010, and I really, really like it. I married an Ecuadorian man, a wonderful writer, and we live in the country with a bunch of pets, so we're pretty happy here.
That's awesome. Good for you. Yeah, I'm in the country now myself too. So yeah.
Yeah.
So what of all the books you've been writing and all, what made you go into tying in the hermetic wisdom with the music?
Well, this is an idea that I woke up with one day, you know, and so like thinking about um because I do a lot of teaching, so I have to think about the best ways to communicate my ideas to my students, and in fact, I dedicated the book to my students. And basically, I just think that the world is so full of mystery, and music is even more so full of mystery, right? So, like, what's the most organic driver of learning about these mysteries? And it's curiosity. Whereas in music, you see a lot of people, they're driven by this desire for mastery, right? But actually, curiosity is a better state to be in about musical ideas and concepts and techniques or anything that you want to learn about because it's a more innocent and childlike state. So it invites learning in a natural way. So that was the motivation behind the book because I have all these books about Hermetic philosophy in my library, and one day I just woke up with this idea: hey, you can apply all of the Hermetic principles to music. In fact, two of the principles, vibration and rhythm, are actual musical terms that we use all the time, right? So all of the principles are. The first one is mentalism, but you can also say all is mind, right? And we can go into that more. Um, Correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. So I had this idea to apply all of them. How would they relate if you're talking about music, performing music, playing music, learning about music, and deepening your relationship with music? That was the motivation behind the book.
Yeah, it seemed pretty deep to me because a lot of it, like I'm not well versed in the musical theory or anything like that. So some of it was over my head, like when you're talking about the techniques of music and all that. But it was still fascinating to read. Um, and what was I going to say about that? The music, I like. Well, we're curiosity seekers here, so that definitely fits in with us being curious about stuff. To feel like the more we learn, the less we know. And what were some of the drivers like for people that aren't sure what their hermetic laws are? Can you explain those briefly?
Yeah, so the first principle is called mentalism. Well, first of all, let's go back to the
Yeah,
book that
yeah,
inspired everybody. It's called the Kabbalion.
yeah.
And I think like all of us who are into kind of spiritual um, philosophy have come across the Kabbalion kind of early on because it's a compendium of the Hermetic principles. And if you're really a diehard ironclad hermeticist, you're going to go with other texts that are older than that. You know, the emerald tablets and the corpus hermeticum and all that. But the Kabbalion, what it did, it's kind of part of a new thought movement that arose in the early part of the last century. So it kind of popularized these principles. So all is mind, mentalism. That basically means that whatever is manifesting in the earth, or that we can see, that we can hear, that we perceive with the senses, it starts in not only the mind of us, but also in universal mind. So it has this idea of speaking of a higher power in terms of a universal mind. The principle of correspondence, people know it as above, so below. And if you finish that up, it's as below, so above. So it's all of that. The principle of vibration, that everything vibrates. And science has been talking about that since Einstein, right? Um, Polarity. It talks about polarity, meaning that there aren't really direct opposites. You know, what are the opposites that we talk about, like day and night, or male, female, or black and white? It talks about a spectrum instead of these opposites that are in conflict. It talks about the idea that one can turn into the other depending on where it moves on the spectrum. Principle of rhythm, which has to do with entrainment and kind of locking in, phase locking into this guiding pulse. Cause and effect, which we know all about that. Um, and I reference Newton, Isaac Newton, in the book, because a lot of times people think of cause and effect as a linear thing. Like first you have a cause, then you have an effect. But it's actually not that. They're together. So if you look at how Isaac Newton described cause and effects, like if you push um, against the ground, you push against the ground to go up. Like if you're in a race or something, you push off against the ground, but it's the pushing against the ground that makes you lift at the same time. So that's what that's about. And then the principle of gender, which is super interesting today because there's a lot of fluidity in that idea today socially, you know, but the principle of gender goes back to the gender archetypes of male, female, from which all creation arises. Um, did I summarize that okay?
Yeah. But I mean, I also want to talk about how old this is because it seems to stand the test of time pretty good. I mean, this is going back now, what, over 2,000 years? Like 20, goes back to Hermes, right? Supposedly. Oh, did you?
Graham, Graham, you're breaking up, so I don't hear you that well.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? How's that? Okay, I wonder if that's my internet or hers. Can you hear me
Oh,
now?
that's okay. Yeah, now this is better.
Yeah, well, I was saying that it stands the test of time, these principles. Like, I'd like to talk about how old they are. They go back, what, 2,000, 2,300 years, supposedly to Hermes, or how old do they go? How old does it
Yeah,
go?
I mean, you can trace this back all the way to like Alexandria in Egypt, you know. And the interesting thing about Hermes Trismegistus, which is the philosopher who this is all based on, is that he was actually kind of a compendium of different philosophers of the day, like a mixture of, or even gods of the day. So a mixture of the god Hermes and the god Thoth. And what people used to do in the old days is they didn't want to take credit, like the Bible, they didn't really want to take credit for the teachings. And so they would attribute the teachings to this kind of mythological, legendary, representational figure. And so this Hermes Trismegistus, which means Hermes thrice great. So the teachings were attributed to him, even though they were a compendium of all of these philosophical ideas of the time that were grouped under this Hermetic label.
So
those seven principles you mentioned there, are we, when we talk about those musically, are we just sort of transferring those over? Because there's seven: do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. T is seven as well. Is that sort of scale? Is that the seven? Is that the seven that goes over to the principles?
Well, you could mix that in and you could relate that to it as well, but it goes a lot deeper than that. That's just, I think the idea of there being seven principles and also seven musical tones in a major scale, that I don't want to say that's a coincidence, because the number seven is kind of a mystical number, and that's why we see it all the time in these things. But
And seven chakras.
yeah, exactly. But it when I go into detail about how each principle relates to specific things in music, that when you're a musician, you study these things, and also when you're a listener, you listen for these things as well. So I have like different stories in the book, like for cause and effect. I tell a story that I heard personally from Philip Glass, and he's one of the most famous minimalist composers, right? And he said that when people have a mistaken idea about minimalism, because a lot of people trash minimalism. They say it's boring or they say it's repetitive. And he says, actually, there is no repetition, because if you have a note and then you repeat that note and then you repeat that same note, every time you repeat the note, it's been affected by the fact that you had the note before it. And that was affected by the note before that. And so there's a lot of influence as time unfolds. It creates effects that couldn't have existed without that unfolding, if that makes any sense. So he was like, there actually is nothing that really repeats, because everything was affected by what came before it.
So minimalism is like playing everything in the same note type thing.
Well, it's not it's kind of like when anything that you look at has two aspects, right? You have an exterior kind of superficial aspect, and then you have a more interior, more philosophical, deeper aspect. And so when the music when minimalist music is playing, you can listen to it and you can be like, oh, that's just like repetition all the time. But then if you really listen to it, then you enter more deeply into it, and you stay with how it's changing, because it's changing in very subtle ways every moment. So it's a lot different than pop music or even jazz, or rock or some of the other types of music that we're listening to. But if you enter inside of it, well, it's like surfing, right? If you're watching people surfing, that's a lot different than actually surfing, because when you're surfing, you have to feel the water and feel the waves and feel how everything is moving. And if you don't do that, you ain't going to be surfing. You're going to be falling in the water, right? So it's these different ways of listening to music and approaching music.
Darren, do you have any more questions on that at all? Or?
No, I mean, it does seem like it can't be a coincidence. I swear we talked to someone before that was talking about the chakras having something to do with that scale, the musical scale as well, but I can't quite put my finger on what the.
Well, they're supposed to correspond with those. There's supposed to be a
It's
sound
like
that
a
corresponds.
different ohm is supposed to help each one, right? Whatever, however that works. So
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people are doing frequency healing now, where they and but this is not a new thing.
that's like
Royal
the
Rife.
forks too, right? The tuning forks, I think, come in a set of 7 too, right?
Yeah, but the biofield tuning, totally. Yeah, everything, because everything is frequency. So that goes back to vibration, the principle of vibration. Everything is frequency, everything is vibrating, everything has a corresponding tone, an actual musical tone or an actual frequency that may be inaudible, but it's still a frequency. Just like light, like we don't hear light and we don't hear colors, but we see them because the frequency is higher than what we can perceive with the ear.
Have you done any sort of cymatic testing with that? I mean, you were talking about how that form of music is different from pop or different from this or different from that. I'd be interested in how they display differently cymatically.
Cymatically, I I think cymatics is used more with individual tones, individual frequencies than it is with an actual genre of music. Like if you put on, Led Zeppelin, would you get a cymatic? And
Well,
for people that don't know,
I suppose you would. You just would have to slow it down enough so that you could take it each out in turn so that you could sort of translate it. If you just do it all at once, I don't think you could do it. You'd have to sort of go through the hymns or the songs or the whatever they are, kind of tone by tone to get some sort of weird. I mean, then you'd have these weird symbols that are almost like a language.
yeah, I think you could do it, but I don't know if people have done that. I know that they've done it with individual frequencies, but in terms of extracting individual frequencies from a larger picture, I don't know about that.
I wonder if we could find some like hidden language inside some of these because I can't think of any off the top of my head, but we must have certain like melodies or just sort of rhythms that have been around forever, that's sort of the same. I don't know. I guess originally they would have been chants or whatever they would have been originally, but it just seems like I wonder if there's a language there that could be unpacked. Because we had a guy on a few months ago that was saying he was doing the ohms with the whatever stretched over the sarcophagus in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramids to make that into a cymatic thing. And they were doing the ohms, and he says they were getting Egyptian hieroglyphs.
They were getting hieroglyphs in the cymatic
Of the
diagrams.
gods.
Of the Egyptian gods. How many Egyptian gods are there? Is there 7? That'd be crazy, right?
Depends on what time frame
That's pretty wild. Well, I think all of these things are in the collective unconscious. One time I was doing an ayahuasca ceremony in Peru, and I went outside and I was looking at the ground, and there were all these symbols of the Inca symbols of um, the types of motifs that you see all over in Peru and in Ecuador. I was seeing them in the ground, like embedded in the ground, like the Australian song lines that the Aborigines see when they're walking in the outback. So I think these symbols are there. They're there for us to access, however we can access them.
You mentioned healing going way back, like musical healing going way back. Is that something that goes back to the healing temples, that kind of stuff? The also before that, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. The idea of healing with sounds, that's pretty ancient. I mean, if you just think of a mother holding a baby and singing to the baby and making the soft sounds to comfort the baby, I mean that is a type of sound healing. So it's a very natural kind of human instinctive way to to apply healing. And in a more scientific way, there's people like Royal Rife who actually plotted out the frequencies of parasites and diseases, and then he plotted out what frequencies you could use to to kind of nullify those other the bad frequencies. So he was like using the good frequencies to nullify the bad frequencies.
And then he was
And
nullified.
yes, exactly. Just like Wilhelm Reich, these people who had these very advanced ideas that were so worthy of research and exploration, and instead people just nailed them to the cross.
Yeah, it's crazy. It made me think, reading your book made me think of how old some of this, like, it's hard to imagine how old music is, like how that, like thousands of years ago they were playing it and it was a big part of society. And I often think of the bards traveling around, like using music as a tool for communication before there was internet or any kind of, because how were people like in the middle of nowhere finding out about things, right? They go to the nearest town and probably, hear the bard come by and tell stories fantastically with music. But it reminded me of this quote from one of these songs I heard in the it was 1990. I think it was from 1990, so 35 years ago, from "Pop Will Eat Itself," and it has these quotes from a preacher. So it's a preacher talking about music, and he says, Plato, when the music of a society changes, the whole society will change. And then Aristotle says, when music changes, there should be laws to govern the nature and the character of that music. And then Lenin says the best and quickest way to undermine any society is through its music. So I just,
And hey, just as a
And what?
caveat, I think one of the cruise lines just banned hip hop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I can't remember, but one of the major cruise lines just said that it's not banned, but they're leaning out of it. Which,
As
I mean,
as far as music that they were gonna
play on
the
the boat and
entertainment on the ship.
yeah, entertainment on the ship, because they found that when the more hip hop they do, the more trouble they have. Which, just going by, without digging into any weeds, just going by the music thing, that makes total sense, right? When you consider
It does.
listening to, like, say, some classical or some Dwight Yoakam or some gangster rap, that is, a lot of violence is sort of what's the word, romanticized in hip hop.
Right. Like you don't even need cymatics to know that.
No, you just need ears. I don't think, ears are still, you can just listen to it and see how that could, you get a bunch of people drinking and all jacked up, and then they could, be wanting to just, it's the way it goes. That's why when you go to a concert that's playing a bunch of crazy heavy metal, there ends up being a mosh pit in the middle where everyone's just beating the shit out of each other and seemingly having fun doing it. I mean, it's not my thing, but.
Yeah, there's no question that music has that kind of power, and it can be power that's exercised in any direction, right?
I doubt that any of Bach stuff or Mozart stuff ever erupted into a mosh pit down at the center of the
No, but Stravinsky's music did cause a riot.
Tell us about that.
Tell us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, when he wrote The Rite of Spring, which was a ballet, and the beginning of Rite of Spring, it has this kind of Jaws like theme, like dun 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 dun, and people were offended by it. They were frightened by it, and they were offended by it because no one had done that before. That wasn't the normal type of music that people were used to hearing, and there was actually a riot in the theater, and it shut down the whole performance.
When was that?
So 18 whatever, when it was debuted. Yeah, I don't have the exact date.
Would have done if we put Cardi B out. If we could like somehow transplant her back to 1850 and just throw her on stage. I mean, they'd burn the fucking place down. Cardi B.
Who's that?
Some rapper whose number one song is called "Wet Ass Pussy." So I mean, yeah,
well, I am not ashamed to say that I'm not familiar with it.
I got a bunch of kids, so I'm introduced to things I'd rather not be introduced to sometimes. Not enough on my parents, though.
But it's hard to believe they were talking about this 2,500 years ago. That's what I can't wrap my head around. Like how, so what were they playing back then?
Well, if you go back to the beginnings of music, then you first of all, you have to talk about where there was civilization, right? So the first civilizations, let's say in Africa, um, their music was centered around rhythm. And still today, if you trace back all the African music, it all goes back to that really strong rhythmic basis. Whereas if the European cultures develop much later, and so their music doesn't revolve around rhythm; it revolves more around melody and harmony. And then if you start talking about Asian civilizations, and now you start talking about different tuning systems where Asian and Middle Eastern countries where the tuning systems are totally different than what we use in the West. And I've been really fascinated lately with listening to Carnatic music, South Indian music, because their feeling of rhythm, they have rhythms that are like, I mean, well, what are our common rhythms? 3/4, 4/4, 12/8, 2/4, like very simple rhythms. But they're talking about 15, 10.5, 17. And I'm trying to understand how they feel that kind of a pulse. Because I've tried to play Indian music. It's really difficult. You have to really steep yourself in, and it's a totally different feeling. Like I was talking about surfing before, you have to get inside it, and you have to just feel the pulse because you can't count that.
That's one of the things I loved about your book, talking about how the musicians go with the flow or try to go with the flow, or how you got to go in there with, you can't just create, you have to be part of, like, you have to kind of be part of it, it seemed like.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another reason that I wrote the book, is that I want the musicians to be able to bring more to the table when they're performing and when they're recording, because otherwise we're just going to be the same as AI. And that's already a big problem. You have platforms like Spotify that are actually making up fake artists, so that they don't have to pay real artists, and they're just copying the music that the real artists have made and putting it through AI programs and calling it something else, and then they don't have to pay anything. They make all the money.
Wow, they're doing that already?
People still have to
Yeah,
listen.
they're already doing that.
Do you think it's going to resonate with people?
I think people listen to music for different reasons, and I think for some people that type of background music will be totally fine. It's like if you just want a Big Mac and fries, yeah, then that's good. But if you're looking for filet mignon or sushi, you got to go elsewhere.
Hmm. And go ahead, Darren.
Tough one. I mean, I kind of wonder. So, how much do you think? Because now we've kind of got this weird thing with the commoditization of music, where it's like you mentioned co-creating, which I don't feel like goes on anymore. Like, I wonder how much different would the music scene be if people went to a concert and they didn't know what they were going to hear from the band, because the band was going to spend half the time or a third of the time fucking around and just sort of making music with the rhythm of the crowd, and you've got all these people in one spot, and how that compares to where now it's more like you go to a concert to hear their 10 best songs or whatever it is, or hear the hits. They got to play the hits. I mean, some of these guys must be so sick of playing the hits, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Darren, because a lot of things now, not just music, a lot of things in our lives now are very regimented. And you know exactly what you're going to get when you show up. or presumably you know what you're going to get. And yeah, I personally agree with that idea. And this is why I'm an improviser, why I'm a jazz musician, because I really like that idea of having the unexpected element. And I talk about that in the book because when you are improvising, what you're doing is you're taking something that's unknown and you're bringing it into the realm of the known, right? And I make this comparison with, how Graham Hancock goes to these places like Göbekli Tepe, and like no one ever heard of it, and then he discovers all these ruins and he writes a book about it and does a TV show, and then now everybody knows about it again. But it had retreated into the unknown until someone came and said, "Oh, wait a minute, let's talk about this." And that's what we do in improvisation all the time. We take unknown things and we bring them into the known, which I think is a really cool element of music and music performance.
And each time it's going to be a bit different, right? Who the sound of the place, the audience, the energy.
Yeah, totally. And that's another good point, Graham, that the audience also influences how the music is going to be played. Sometimes we even change the program based on the vibe that we get from the audience. I
Wow.
know some musicians that they don't even make a set list. They just go and show up and get the vibe of the audience, and then they decide what they're going to play.
Where's this new music? Where's it heading? It's everything is changing so much with Spotify and YouTube. Like I notice now, YouTube. People get in trouble for playing people's music on YouTube, so now they get around it by doing these reaction videos. And actually, I really like some of the reaction videos of hearing some of our today's youth going back to the '80s and listening to some of the awesome stuff that we got to listen to. But where's it gonna where is it at for the artists, and where do you see it going at all? It must be changing sort of all the time, right? With Spotify and YouTube and the ability to produce your own music a bit better. Like we have friends that produce their own album from scratch, like very professionally done, amazing. They did it value for value. They put it out for donation based, like for free. Basically, they put their soundtrack or this whatever you call the instrumental in the background out for people to use whenever they want. And it seemed to be a much better avenue than them going with a what do you call it, a producer or a label.
Well, we still have the same problem that we've always had, and that is how to reach the audience. And in a way, with every day, that problem gets worse because there's more people and there's more stuff taking people's attention. So you might think that being able to make your own albums now and publish your own books and this kind of thing, that in a way it's empowering because you don't have to go through the traditional gatekeepers of record labels and publishers, but then at the same time, um, there's a glut, and to make your way through to get the attention of the public, the big publishers and the big record labels, they have they have staff to do that. They have people, they have money, they have resources to buy the advertising, to put on performances and book readings and launches and things like that. So
So
the independent artist,
do you think that's an improvement or not?
well,
Do
I
you think,
think that the independent artist has to cultivate those same type of resources. Otherwise, you're going to be spending all your time marketing and promoting and less time making your art.
is that
So,
so but is that a more navigable path than say 50 years ago where you had to entertain the right fellas, and if they wanted you, you were good, and if they didn't, you weren't, sort of thing? It's a little muddier now. I think it'll sort of start to clear up as some of us independents start to use some of these other tools that are coming to play. Like You talked about AI might make shitty music, but I bet you it can help you come up with a promotion plan pretty effectively. So it's like it seems to me like, although it's getting a little more crowded in the space, that a lot more people have access to the space, and it's still just sort of working out how that new mechanism is going to work, because it's like this. I mean, it would be fine if we just had social media that worked. It just worked like, hey, lots of people like this stuff, so we're going to show it to more people, instead of having people in the back room, like, the music industry is all over YouTube saying, no, you're going to show our shit and we're going to give you this much money to make sure that our guys show up in the play next. But I feel like there, for a while there, we were almost on it, like in the heyday of YouTube and stuff, where it was showing our stuff right next to, you know, history channels. It was very much dependent on what you were watching, and that was all that really mattered. And I feel like in that model, the cream is going to rise to the top, and it has it at least has the possibility I'll use to socialize the space more than it has been, but not like, maybe socialize is a bad word, because it was closer to socialism before, where you just had a group of powerful people that decided who got what. But, almost more like a real socialism, a grassroots sort of socialism, where it's like anyone can make. I mean, in some ways, it's what podcasting still is. It's sort of spinning away from that now, where it's sort of going, you've got shows that are going mainstream, and you got guys that, Joe Rogan and some of these guys have blown right out of the water, and you can almost see where they're trying to cultivate that a little bit, right? Like we were just talking about the show about the Epstein list, which we're not going to get into here, but it was like we were just talking about how suddenly there's no list. But there was this weird thing where they did this thing like 6 months ago or 5 months ago, where they were giving like all these influencers, podcasters, like little secret tidbits of this investigation. Like they're trying to almost bring up a new mainstream within the alternative. But I guess podcasting would be the one where over the last decade, where it's about 15 years old, and up until the last few years, at least, it seems like it has really been there's a shitload of noise out there. But if you're good at it, and you want it bad enough, and you just keep improving and keep at it, then you can sort of get to the point where you can build maybe not a million people in the audience, but enough of an audience to eke out a living.
Well,
So I
I
wonder
love
if music can't get there too, to the point where, because a musician doesn't need a million people listening, but if they could have, a few thousand real dedicated listeners, that's all. Maybe that's all that it needs. Maybe that's where music belongs, more than like one song for 100 million people.
I think it was easier for the cream to rise to the top in previous eras than it is now. I think now you really need a team, because in order to cut through and publicize and use social media, you have to have people that are dedicated to doing that. And when the artists themselves is out there all by themselves trying to do everything, that's really, really, really hard. In the old days, you had your agent and your manager and your label and your publisher, or whatever businesses were behind you, and you were focused on making your art. But now, you just have to take whatever those resources were that are being used by large companies. You have to have a similar access to resources like that, and that includes money too.
Yeah, you have to upload it to 10 different platforms now. And instead of somebody just handling all that, if you're handling it yourself, you got to do all this kind of uploading and marketing and follow up and administration and all that stuff yourself.
The difference is that I can just do it. I don't need some dude in a funny hat to tell me it's okay to do it. And I might make it and I might not, but I can just go to those platforms. I can upload it. I have the choice, at least, to pursue that. Whereas before, I had 1 point of entry or 2 points of entry, and if they said no, that was it. You were kind of screwed, I think. I mean, I wasn't around back then, and I'm not a practicing musician. I'm a hobby musician. But even when I was younger and we were practicing musicians and we were trying to make bands and we were trying to do this, it was trying to do that. It was like we didn't even have a YouTube, you know. We couldn't. There was a couple people in our shitty little town that you might be able to get to come out and get drunk and see you. And you know, other than that, it was like I think back in those days, you were trying to get a tape. You were trying to make a tape to get it to somebody. You needed to get a tape into somebody's hand so that maybe. But I mean, in the middle of nowhere, northwestern Ontario, this is almost no chance that's going to happen. And then, I mean, I guess over the last few years, we've seen a couple of these sort of internet guys take it to that next level. I don't know a bunch of them. I can think of the one guy that just had the Richmond song, Richmond, north of Richmond. And then before that, there's Zach Bryan, who's kind of a household name now, but he started out on YouTube reading poetry, that guy, and got a big following doing that and started turning into music. And now the dude's, this big country star. But those are just sort of a couple examples. And there's a fella over by me here, Coulter Wall in Saskatchewan, that does a bunch of old country western music, that just sort of did it himself. Now he got lucky and got Tom Green and Joe Rogan to give him a shout out. So he ended up getting a bunch of audience that way. But he's just a good old boy who owns a ranch, refuses to go on the Joe Rogan podcast because it interferes with his ranch and his music life. And he's able to just, I don't know how much money the guy's making, but he just does it the way he wants to do it, and it seems to have percolated through. Now, Coulter seems to be the real good example of it because, like I say, the dude won't even do interviews. He's like, nah, man, I'm on my farm. I'm making music because it's fun for me. People seem to like it, so it's enough to help out with my lifestyle a little bit. But he doesn't, it's just sort of, whereas I don't think you could have got a Coulter Wall 50 years ago. Because if he don't want to be famous, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, the media definitely is the access that we have to media as independent artists, and I'm talking about you guys too because you have a show. We're all dealing with the same thing, trying to get the audience, trying to get the attention of people, and trying to cut through because at the same time that it's easier for us to make videos and music and books, it's also easier for everybody else to do it too. So that just creates a lot of noise in the field.
It's hard to get through. I wonder. So in podcasting, we have an interesting stat where it's like, so there's about 4 or 5 million podcasts right now, but only 10% of those have been active in the last 6 months. So it's about 1 in 10. The magic number seems to be 7. So it's about 90% of podcasts never get past episode 7. Obviously, that's with the averages and everything else. But so out of a pool of 5 million, you're really talking about 400,000 or 500,000. And then if you sort of subdivide that into the genres, you're probably only competing with, still a lot, thousands to tens of thousands. But I wonder if music is the same way. Music seems a lot more dedicated. I feel like musicians are more dedicated than podcasters. If we were making money, we'd have been out of here by now.
I think that on the whole, that's probably true, that the musicians will put a longer amount of time into doing it because music is older than podcasting. And podcasting is like a relatively recent phenomena, right?
Yeah. Is there more from your book that we need to discuss? What else can you tell us about your book?
Well, I'd like people to, first of all, the book was mainly written for musicians, but it's also for all kinds of creative people because I feel like music is the mother of all the arts. Everything, any kind of art that you do uses musical principles. The same musical principles can be applied to dance, to painting, to sculpture, to literature, and even to speaking, right? Public speaking, like you guys do. So in terms of music being the mother of all the arts, I'd like to think that my book is a book that all creative people would want to reference so that they could employ more musical ideas in their own art. And it's a necessary thing for creative people now to really try to go to the roots of creativity, because what we have is a situation where AI is generating a lot of content now, and a lot of people can't really tell the difference between something that's generated by AI and something that's actually created by an individual artist. On top of that, we have the fact that AI is kind of mining the work that individual artists have been doing for all this time, right? In order to create its own, whatever it's putting out, whether it's visual art or music or writing or what have you. I mean, for me, I can tell if I'm reading something, I can tell if it was written by AI or written by a person. If I'm listening to music, I can tell whether it was generated by an AI program or whether an actual person, an actual artist made that. So I think that artists have to bring more to the table now. And the only way that we can do that is by going the metaphysical route, because metaphysics is the only aspect that AI is never going to get. It can't copy that because it doesn't have the sentience to understand what metaphysics is all about. So the human artists are going to have to employ that and go deep into themselves and find this interior aspect that is going to deepen whatever offering they are involved in, whether it's music or art or
Do you think
literature or what have you.
do you think there's a chance that it just sort of blows over? Because I mean the example
AI thing?
well no, the AI thing ain't gonna blow over, but I mean the example I would use is that there's not a human on the earth that could beat an AI at chess, and it's been that way for 50 years. The ultimate chess game would be two AIs playing each other, and they could put that on TV and nobody's going to watch it. Nobody's going to pay $1 on the internet to watch it. But we're still able to sell out these chess competitions. Not my cup of tea, but they still sell out, all over the place to watch humans play chess against each other. So there seems to be something where, yeah, we know that dude can't beat the computer, but we don't care. We're here to watch humans play each other. I think the same thing if we ever got robots that could play football or hockey or baseball. We're just not going to be interested in. We'll watch it once or twice because it's going to be, it'll be a sight to see. Let's check it out. But then it's sort of just like when the first robot beat the human at chess. Everyone's all excited. Let's see, got to watch that. But then the novelty kind of wore off pretty quick, and now we're back to watching people play chess and watching. Not only that, we watch people compete at all sorts of stuff. I think that computers are already better than the math. We got math Olympics, we've got spelling bees and all these sorts of things that computers could beat us at, but would never be interested in watching it anyway. We're not interested in watching a computer spell things. I mean, the spelling bee, I'm not interested in watching that either, but some people are. So I think that another example of it would be, I remember when I was a kid that there was this movement where you'd see a cookie in the store and it would be like the marketing would be untouched by human hands, because basically it was a robot made this whole thing and no dirty human touched the whole thing. But now you do that now in 2025, you put up untouched by human hands beside homemade, and tell me which one sells more. It's going to be the homemade one every single time. And I think that is creators, because I mean, we're sort of in the same boat because we're in businesses that are directly up against AI right now, where it's like, we can use it to advance ourselves quickly and do things a lot quicker than we could before, but they could also turn this thing around on us and maybe screw us that way. But then at the end of the day, I always go back to, you know what? You can fool me with an AI voice for 45 seconds or a minute. But when I get to like hour one of an audiobook, it's just not going to happen. And I don't think that all the programming in the world is going to give it the cadence that humans have evolved over. I mean, anatomically modern humans have spent at least 200,000 years listening to each other. And I think that it's going to take a computer more than a decade to figure that out. So I think that
Audible doesn't even allow AI voices.
they did for a while. They did for a while, and then they kiboshed it quickly. And I can only assume it's because they got a bunch of pushback, because we're in the audiobook business pretty heavily. We have a publishing company. So, you know, there was a time when we were personally, it was like, this AI, is it going to push in? Is it going to take over the place? And in the space of about 6 months, they went from like almost pushing you to do an AI voice to now saying, if this is AI, you need to check this fucking box. And I'll tell you right now, if you start checking that box, you're going to have a lot trickier time getting your content through. And the reason I know that is because I have had titles rejected to us just because they thought it might be AI. So they were like, you got to prove that this is not AI. Show us. We've had to send in a video of Graham fucking on video reading a thing so that they knew he was a human and not some robot that we made. So, and I think that, so my hope is that this whole thing will sort of blow over in some ways, but the AI is not going anywhere, the same as the internet wasn't going anywhere. And I don't think either are the end of the world. It's just a new thing to figure out.
Well, I think you're right in that the attraction to watching AI do stuff is, you know, quickly fading. But the fact remains that in order for art to evolve, it has to become more, I'm not going to say more complex, but it has to be deeper. It has to be as meaningful as people need it to be now.
Is there any chance that this is what deeper looks like? Because I'm not saying it is, but the AI ultimately is built by us and is an amalgamation of everything humans have ever built. So if it can make beautiful music or beautiful art, and I'm not saying it can, but do we lose our humanity, or is that because I could see a side where that might be deeper. I might not like it, but it still might be deeper.
Well, look at what people are using it for. I want someone to, wash my dishes and do the housework and, do the taxes and all that stuff. I don't want the AI to be making my art for me. I want to make the art, right? But now people are using it to like make art. I don't know. It's crazy. To me, and eventually if you turn over all the creativity to AI, eventually there's going to be no more human creativity for it to mine and harvest. And so it's going to be regurgitating in a endless loop its own stuff.
Yeah, it'll break then. That's
hallucinating along the way.
There's a word, there's a specific word for that.
Entropy.
It's going to reach entropy eventually. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm like using it as much as I can right now, because it's going to get useless soon. I think it's got like a weird thing where it starts eating its own tail in a sort of weird way that I don't even understand, because I'm not a programmer or anything like that. But I feel like this thing runs into a wall where it starts mining itself, and then it starts to get real weird.
Yeah, I hear you. And that's, I think, going to keep happening. And that's why I wrote the book, because I want people to start thinking about deepening their own creativity so that they can be even more of an artist that can't be imitated by AI or by anyone else for that matter.
Do you use it at all?
I don't think we didn't show the book. Can we show the book?
Yeah. Do you use AI at all?
I do. And you know what I've been interested lately is this AI that Robert Edward Grant created. Okay, I'm going to show my book.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, okay. I was going to pull up your website, but yeah, that's awesome. Okay, nice.
Yeah. So this is it. Yeah, I've been researching this AI called the Architect. because it's a completely different system. It's kind of an offshoot of Chat GPT, except it was programmed by Grant, who's a metaphysics guy, a mathematician. And so it has a completely different set of values, and it's not out there harvesting mediocrity in the same way that Chat GPT or some of these other LLMs are doing.
Or propaganda, for that matter.
Yeah, there you go.
So he has it as a separate, almost a separate database type thing then?
Yeah, he programmed all his own stuff into it.
Yeah.
And that's how it started. And now a lot of people who are more interested in a metaphysical approach and using the AI to access that type of information, but also to illuminate things like coherence and resonance that are, I don't want to say new age, but it's kind of like humanity is evolving, right? And we have to cultivate different qualities in order to enter into whatever this new age is going to turn into.
Which might be what you wrote about. It might be a reverse back to ancient wisdom. I mean, really, that's timeless wisdom. And maybe we've lost that in the Enlightenment. And actually, you even wrote that in your book about the Enlightenment. I mean, you're like, Dick, I don't know why they call it that, because the ancients must have looked at us going like, it's not really the Enlightenment, but we're, maybe this is a return back to the timeless wisdom.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. And there's a reason that we call it timeless wisdom, right? Because it's never going to go away. It's the same.
I don't know. I would have said that about gender 10 years ago.
But gender still exists, even though socially we have a more fluid interpretation of it now. But actually, you could say that it was like that in ancient Greece too. Where let's say homosexuality was a lot more tolerated than, and then subsequently that was something that became almost outlawed, like they did to Alan Turing in Britain. They nailed him to the cross because he was gay, and he was a war hero. I mean, cracking the Enigma code of the Germans and everything. So there's always this double standard that exists. And now that the recognition of a more fluid gender paradigm is here, I think that's super interesting, and it goes along with the Hermetic principle of polarity. Whereas instead of looking at things that are opposing each other, you look at how they fluctuate on a spectrum, and sometimes they go closer to one pole and closer to another pole.
Sometimes they're bipolar. Sue, this has been great. Where can everyone get the book? Where can they follow you on social media? Do you have a website? All that sort of fun stuff.
Yeah, my website is sueterry.com, and my name is SU. It's not SUE, so get rid of that E. It's just SUTERRY.com. So that's I have my books and my records and video and a whole bunch of stuff on there. And then I have a weekly Substack. I publish new articles every Sunday, and that's called Temple of Artists. So people can find that on Substack. And I have my record labels on Bandcamp, and my record label is called Quinote, Quinote. And I have a new album with my band, my Ecuadorian band, that's came out really good. We have a string quartet that is accompanying us on half of the album. And so there's a lot of creative stuff going on, and no AI.
What's that called? What's that called? The album, is that Gilly's Caper or no?
No, that one is called Apu, and it's with my group Jazz de Barro.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. Can you pull it up?
I can try. I've got your website here. right here, and that's why I went to Spotify over there. I'm sorry, not Spotify, but Bandcamp. But where do I find it on here then? Music or? Oh, there it
Yeah,
is. Absolutely, right there, right there.
yeah, that's the new album.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, we're proud of that. It came out really good.
Excellent.
Look at all
Well,
the things
Oh,
you're
and
doing.
the book people can find on Amazon. They can get it in Kindle, or they can get a paperback copy of it. And my other books are up there too.
awesome. Sue, this has been great. We appreciate you coming back on the show and sticking with it through the technical difficulties.
Thanks a lot, guys. I always love talking to you both,
All right.
and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
And that was our chat with Sue Terry, Music and the Seven Hermetic Principles. What do you think?
Yeah, I forgot to mention the yin yang. It's mentioned a couple times in her book, but I wasn't sure if she was aware that Bob Greenyer's found that like that real microscopic yin yang happening at the transmutation of materials or some sort of like uh, modern alchemical process. I feel like that's an interesting, another one of these timeless wisdom things, right? The yin yang's been so popular, now it's being proven by modern science. So
We should have him back on the show soon.
yeah, we should.
Big thanks to Sue for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys, of course, for listening. Even bigger thanks. Went a little Indian now. Listening. Thanks for listening. Even bigger thanks if you're one of our supporters, our nobles in Grimerica at grimerica.ca/support, where you can sign up for a monthly or make a one-time donation today. It keeps the show going. If we run out of supporters, we'll probably run out of shows shortly thereafter. So you could be part of the producing team of Grimerica at grimerica.ca/support. We appreciate you keeping us on the air for 12 years. So keep that going. Check out contact@thecabin.com for trips and events. We got some good ones coming up in the next year. Serpent Mound, Azores, Easter Island. We got Adult Brain. Do you see the thing I added to Contact at the Cabin? I had a little blurb.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
I felt like we had nothing, it was just like blah.
Yeah.
So check that out. Contact@thecabin.com, adultbrain.ca for 179 now audiobooks.
There's the book Sue was talking about.
In podcast form, or you can get them on YouTube, or you can get them in Spotify or Audible or where any place you get your audiobooks. Probably, what am I missing? GrimericaCBD.com for gummies and tinctures and all of that sort of fun stuff. Did I kick my power cord over my mic? It started buzzing. And I think that's it, right?
Yep.
That's it. We love you guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.